Iconoclast joins some of today's more influential celebrities, visionaries that inspire. Next.
Oh my God, this is fantastic. It's great. Skiing is much harder. I've tried and I fell. Look at this. Here I can go very fast. In one person like Dean, there can be so much energy and he can do so many things. He can create a revolution. Now, does your wheelchair is based on the same principle?
Yes. Isabella, she's had an interesting background growing up in Europe just after the war. She speaks 4 languages fluently. She obviously has got some pretty broad-based background that I wish I had.
How does it move?
It's magic.
No, how does he do it? Tell me.
Right now, I'm going to get in my airplane, fly down to pick up Isabella Rossellini. It'll probably take me 5 or 10 minutes to get a clearance out of here. 6 Delta Kilo will depart runway heading to 2000 till it...
Forward, Jojo, forward. Good dog. I've always been interested in animals, and that is part of the reason why I train guide dogs. We don't play with ball, we don't play with frisbee. Anything that is movement and chasing triggers in them this instinct of hunting, so we don't do it. He has to be very disciplined, and he has to guide me.
Boston, Premier 16 Delta Kilo is checking in at 17.5. My father is an artist. My father probably is very much more familiar with Isabella, her father, her mother, than I am, but I am hoping by the end of tomorrow I will have at least a little bit caught up.
We all are who we are. I am the daughter of Ingrid Bergman and Roberto Rossellini. I'm also Isabella Rossellini, who's done her own career and has learned from them and hopefully carry on some of their ideas. I came to New York when my mom was on Broadway. I was 18, 19, to learn English, and I ended up liking the city. So I stayed, I started to work. The more I learned the language, the more opportunity opened, and I had a boyfriend, then I had a husband, then I had kids. And then at the end of 10 years, I said, okay, let's face it. I'm a New York resident. You live where you have to live the life you've chosen. If you're in the arts, you have to be with New York, Los Angeles, Paris, Rome. With Dean, he chose to live in Manchester because he was close to Boston and New York, and most of his medical research and collaborators are there. And also he needs a lot of space and probably less distraction because he has to think all the time.
Tech is a place that tries to apply technology to really big problems in unique ways that, if we're successful, will do a bunch of things. It will give nice careers to a lot of technical people and help me attract even more of them so I can do the next, even bigger and more difficult challenge. But it will deliver to the world products that improve people's lives.
What amazed me about Dean is not only his job as a creator, as an inventor to forward science, but I was surprised about the amount of work that he does in the non-profit. Besides being an inventor, he has the charisma of a leader, he's inspiring. I've never met anybody like him, so I don't know, it's hard to describe him.
There are very few things I could tell you with great certainty, but I can tell you with great certainty, I am not a genius. I wish I could deliver to the world the kinds of stuff that Galileo and Archimedes and Einstein have delivered to the world. I'll never do that. But I might make gizmos that make people's lives better.
With a great sense of admiration for somebody who has done so much, or at least attempts to do so much, to change the big problems of the world. I feel sometimes a frustration to say, how can I help? I'm delighted to be able to help blind people or handicapped have a dog, but my scope is so much smaller than his. That's why I was curious about Dean, and I wondered what makes his difference. Why can he be so big? Unassuming, you know, but big. Hi.
How are you?
I'm fine, and you?
We had a good meeting on the island, by the way.
Oh, yeah, you did?
Tell you.
Oh, yeah, I am very interested.
I did read the book last night. This thing looks easy to fly, so there's nothing to worry about.
You were reading the instruction book last night?
Yeah, last
Good.
night.
Perfect.
I got one of your other movies
Make it ground to taxi.
yesterday. It was very disturbing to watch.
Was it Blue Velvet?
Blue Velvet.
Very disturbing.
Wow. It was probably 12 o'clock at night. I got to watch this one. Put this on. Oh, my God, what's going on here?
But I thought it was interesting because we talked about violence.
It was worse than violence.
Yeah, this
Violence,
was very
it
disturbing.
was disturbing
Yeah.
violence. Is that a famous movie?
Yeah.
She wore blue velvet. Velvet was the night, softer than satin was the light from the stars.
This is the only way to travel. Well, no, but there are two other really good ways to travel. Helicopters and segways. I'm not sure I ever decided that I had a particular gift to go out and try to create inventions. I do remember thinking at a very early age, I don't want a job and I don't want to work for anybody and I don't like being judged by other people. As a young kid in school, I felt enormous pressure. And every time I get myself frustrated that I wasn't doing well in school or I didn't like trying to guess what they expect out of me tomorrow, and frankly, I got to a point where I didn't care what they expected out of me because I didn't respect their opinion. I didn't see them doing anything so wonderful, so why do I care whether they think I'm an A or a B or a C? I don't really care what their opinion is. If it was Albert Einstein critiquing my competence in physics, I'd probably care. Well, I just kept remembering that my father said, make sure you do something that's important to you as your career. Don't try to reserve that for your hobbies. And I started developing the skill sets to create things. That's my house right there with the wind turbine on top of that hill over there.
Wow. It's huge.
Tailwind at 900 feet.
500.
I just close my eyes and wait for the bump.
So how long have you lived here now?
Oh, 20 years.
So you had two homes. You built the first home, and now we're going to your second house.
Yeah, well, what happened was I found a hill. So I took the top of the hill and put one house on top of one lot, on top of 32 acres.
Fantastic.
And that's my wind turbine. I can make more than 50,000 watts of electricity with
Really?
that. So let me turn on some light.
So you built it to accommodate. Tell me what this is.
I built the house to accommodate this engine. This engine was built in the 1850s, and it ran a steam-powered tugboat.
Because I say, what a big house. Now I see why. Is this your father's too?
Every piece of artwork hanging in this house, my father did. The oil paintings, the watercolors, the black and white, the old comic book art that you'll see everywhere. He did many of those before I was born.
So many things. What is this?
Watch what happens. So I turn the handle, and things light up. So I squeeze the box, and out pops Albert Einstein.
This is your father's painting of Einstein?
That's my father's Einstein. Archimedes, Leonardo, Galileo, Isaac Newton. This is an exact 1/3 scale model of the Wright Flyer. And there, by the way, the iBot, when we first made it, President Clinton gave us the National Medal of Technology.
Oh, you have a swimming pool too?
Yep. And if you open it all the way up, we get a waterfall coming down. We're coming through our machine shop.
Yeah. Some of it is like carpentry.
Yeah, except instead of cutting wood, we cut steel.
Yeah, so you-
Computer-controlled machines can cut things to thousandths of an inch with great precision.
But you do it?
Yes. This weekend we made this part.
What can't you do?
Art. People ask me why I do what I do, because I can't do what my father does. Actually, my father's an incredibly gifted artist. I have no artistic talent. My father is not at all into details. He's not at all into business. He's not at all into technology. He is an incredibly gifted, wonderfully jovial, easygoing artist. We couldn't be more different. He has a talent, and I just acquired a skill. But
Wow, what modesty.
well, it's true.
Art, I think, expresses your emotions. And though he kept on saying, I'm not an artist, his house was very artistic because you could tell his love for technology and the machine and how clever it is and how this machine led many centuries later to that machine and how it lives with all this history, which I don't know, but I can intuitively feel by looking at his house. That's what art does. But I can sense his emotion. I think my brain is trained that way. Maybe if I wasn't born in cinema, I would have been an artist and I would have been a writer or a musician. But this is the culture I know. Storytelling is knowledge, and acting allows you to create a portrait of somebody. It's almost like a painter, and I like to do portraits, so I don't mind doing small roles. Modeling and acting has so many things in common, because at the end you photograph emotion, you don't photograph just a beautiful nose. I was so tremendously successful in modeling, representing a symbol of women, that became quite interesting to study it myself. Say, what is it that they see it in me? I had to be appealing to women because I'm selling women products. In fact, if you do a marketing research on me, you would see an enormous percentage of women recognizing me, very few men. But the industry of cosmetic and fashion represents a woman that I think doesn't really correspond totally to a woman's dream, but still represented by a man's dream of a woman. When a woman dresses up to be flirtatious or to be pleasing to men, consequently has given women a feeling that they are unacceptable after a certain age. Beauty expresses who you are, and elegance to me is an expression of an idea. I've chosen for myself simplicity and solid color, which had to come from practicality and the fact that I traveled a lot. I always said maybe in another life I was a nun. I've always have things that are completely covered, monochromatic. Dean is elegant. He has chosen a uniform that tells I don't care about clothes. I concentrate in everything else. Also, he's very American because he's chosen the jeans. And I think he's very linked to the tradition of entrepreneur, changing the world, pioneering. That's very American. Oh, there they are.
These are new products. They've not been released to the public yet.
Mm-hmm. I had a driver's license only 2 years ago, and I still don't drive. So you have to tell me how to do it because I've never driven one.
This one is almost completely wearable. You just lean it in the direction you want to go. You'll see. There you go.
Oh, yeah, it follows my body.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, and slow down, I just lean slightly back. Yes, it moves with me, yeah. Look at this. What is Dean doing? Some somersaults. How does it move?
It has a set of gyroscopes that can sense the tilt, sort of the way you do as a person. When you want to move forward, you kind of pick up your feet and you fall. Well, the gyros sense that this is falling, so they send the wheels out in front of you, and off you go.
It feels like an extension of it exaggerates your body, and you
That's the
learn very
magic.
fast. I would like one. It's the closest thing to walking.
Except
great.
it's the closest thing to walking, but you can't walk at the speed of an average taxi cab.
It would solve the problem of traffic and pollution. And how did you come about thinking about
I was
that?
working on the iBot to help the disabled community. And once we made that work, we realized we could do this as well. But isn't this an incredible way to get around?
It really is. Really wonderful. Here in this room, here is where you think alone? Because you have
Yes, this is my
another-
private shop.
Yeah.
And compared to the guys that run my real shop, I'm probably a butcher. I'm terrible compared to real craftsmen.
But you still need a place where
But I
you
need a place
alone.
to do this. And I used to, when I didn't have all those people, I used to do everything myself. When I was a kid, these are the machines I used to build our first products.
What was
Now
your
I
first
have-
product?
Oh, I was in the early days building medical equipment for my brother when he was in medical school and I was in high school. In the Museum of Natural History in the Hayden Planetarium, I built the electronics to control some of their big shows when I was in high school. In my
How did you
parents'
get the
basement.
job from high school?
That's a funny story. In fact, I'll get you some wine, and over a glass
Okay,
of
I'll
wine,
tell
I'll
you.
tell you that story. I had gotten to the age of high school where kids get summer jobs. And the summer job was redoing the electronics that runs all the displays and shows in the Museum of Natural History in New York. Wiring all those big old rheostat switches that you see in the old movies. And I go there and I spend a week just wiring things. It was manual labor. And finally, after a week, I was so fed up, I quit my job. And I went home and I told my parents I was going to design an electronic box this big that could replace that whole room full of stuff. To make a long story short, I spent the entire summer, I spent a few $100s, which back then was a lot of money, it was all the money I had. And at the end of the summer, I had this box. And I drive back into the city. And sure enough, they were all still there doing all this wiring. And I took the machine in and I demonstrated. And the then director of the whole museum is brought down to see this. And he sees this little box and he sees all this other stuff is disconnected. And he said, "That's great. Who did that?" And I said, "Well, my company did that." I didn't want to tell him it was me.
My company.
My company.
You were what? How old were you?
17 maybe. But I knew that I couldn't say that. And he said, "Well, how much is that box going to cost?" And I swear to you, I hadn't thought about it. Except in that year, I had just gotten a driver's license. And a brand new Mustang was $1,995. So I said, $2,000 is what this box.
It must be incredible to be a mama and have a child like this at home.
We had our issues, but it was a lot of fun. In the end, they always supported me. When we go into my office tomorrow, you'll see my mother's office because from the time I was in high school, she handled all my books until last year at 81 when she retired from DECA.
Do you have anybody else from the family working?
Well, my father does all of the artwork for our projects. My older brother still gives us advice and guidance on all the stuff we build.
In Italy, there is this big tradition of artisans, and you all work in the family. So for me to work in the film was the natural way to grow up.
And you grew up, you were a full-grown adult before you came to the U.S.
Yes.
So all your first jobs
were
were
19. Yes, all my first jobs were on my dad's set. Because I was a girl, I was always doing the costume department. Then I didn't want to work with my family anymore.
Because?
I don't know, for a series of things, maybe just simply as wanting to feel independent. Like probably every young person, it was important for me to feel that I could make it on my own. When I started to work, I was very careful to really just be me. And I did. I mean, all modeling was anonymous. In acting, I always knew that I couldn't have a commercial, regular career. I started acting in my 30s. I wasn't blonde. I had an accent, so I knew that it had to be something different. And also, because I come from another culture, it was easy for me to be more in the avant-garde. And I think it's going even more in that direction, and less in the direction of popular success.
If my dad were an animal, he would have been a seahorse. It's the male who gets pregnant. It's the male who takes care of the babies. My father was a genius, I think.
Now that my parents have been dead for so many years, it's very important that people remembers them. So I often find myself talking about them and connecting my work or my choices to them. Her big career happened in Hollywood. She came to be the sort of young Greta Garbo. David O. Selznick, the great producer. So that was an actress, very young, 22 years old, that was already having quite a career, and offered her a job.
My mom came to Hollywood and made this 10 years, made her legendary career.
Did your father try to dissuade you?
Yes. He was not against me being in film, but he didn't want me to be in acting because he also saw the old artifice. My father was the first one that brought realism to films. In fact, his style was called neorealism. And he really was dictated by poverty and despair. He grew up between two wars, and by the time he was an adult, it was the end of Second World War. And he would borrow the film that the American army would discard, and with a little bit of film here and a little bit of film there, reconstructed what he saw. So it was not a documentary. He reenacted what he saw, the tragedy of the people, how the civilian lived the war, depleted of politics and beliefs, and how difficult it was. And these films were hugely impactful. Rome of Inciti in Paesa.
Francesco! Francesco!
My mom saw his film, wrote him a letter to work together because she saw this fantastically talented Italian making this film in this country destroyed by war. You have to imagine this guy that must have been like a director now in Iraq that receives this phone call from somebody who would be like Julia Roberts or Nicole Kidman saying, I want to work with you. He was so moved by that, and he tried to understand why this woman who had everything, would want to call and work with him. And so he was completely delighted. They met, they decided to do a film together, but also fell in love. And my mom was married. It was an enormous scandal. And my mom became pregnant while they were doing a film. She was asked to leave the United States. She was persona non grata and unable to come back for about 10 years. The United States Senate took a stand against her.
The Senate?
Yes. The Senate.
You'd think they'd have bigger issues to deal with.
I never understood this persistent hatred for my father. The press, once they unleash, they completely tinted his name. 25 years later, people thought of Rossellini still as this Latin lover, playboy. My mom always said, I didn't choose acting, acting chose me. I need to do it. For her, it was that she was hugely shy, as a lot of actors are. To play another person, it's great relief, and it gives you an insight. And then all of a sudden, you become the center of attention. Imagine for a shy person what it does.
I don't have that problem.
You don't have that problem. A shy actor, and all of a sudden, it becomes great agony. But still, you're the top guy, and people want to know you and talk to you, and so you have to be accessible or not, and all that is also an art.
Yeah, I could use some of your skills for that.
What is the difficulty?
I think sometimes the press or the media expect when you have a choice between what's politically correct and what's correct, you go with what's politically correct, and I can't do it.
No.
I can't do it. When I said people should get water that's pure and healthy everywhere in the world, and they should get it now, and they shouldn't have to wait 20 years to build infrastructure, people will depend on historical precedent to say you're wrong instead of depending on current technology. The technology development is easy. Changing people's attitudes is really hard. That's the problem. Why don't we take a walk?
Okay. The first night after meeting Dean, I woke up with this sense of frustration and saying, oh, my God, it must be so hard to know that you can resolve many problems of the world. And yet cultural or financial or political situation will prevent. And this is your helicopter. Oh, you got two.
One would be so lonely.
So you land right in front there and
I
you
land
come
in
right
front
here?
And it just drives itself in, yeah. It's a motorized car. We'll do it tomorrow. We'll drive it out. And we will take the helicopter to my office. This building right here, this mill, and every mill going down to the other end of the mill yard is ours. About half of them I have my own projects, half of them we rent to other companies.
thing that amazed me about Dean is the ability that he has as a real estate entrepreneur to take downtown Manchester and not level all the old building and build new ones, because it takes an extra effort and an extra talent to see an old building and trying to adapt it to his needs, which are so modern.
What a wonderful feeling.
Isn't this unbelievable?
Unbelievable.
DECA was created to focus on really, really novel technical solutions to really tough problems, and then we'll find a partner to put them out. Most of what we do are medical products, dialysis equipment, diabetes pumps, stents. So this is a machine shop that's substantially larger than the one you saw at my house. But the separate thing that DECA does is work on certain projects that may be an answer to a question nobody's had either the courage or vision to ask. How are we going to deal with the fact that maybe this year 6 million people are going to die between now and next year when we're sitting here because they have no water? How are we going to deal with the fact that 20% of the human beings alive today have never used electricity? This is pretty much identical to the 2 machines that went to Bangladesh that powered 2 villages for nearly half a year each.
Instead of
Con Edison.
Con Edison building, and you'd fuel with anything you want.
These ran on cow dung. They did nothing more than have a pit of about 4 feet by 4 feet by 4 feet next to the engine. They cover it with a slab. They bring a plastic pipe out of it, and just the natural degrading of the dung created enough of a pressure of methane gas coming up that pipe that for 24 weeks it kept these engines running.
Unbelievable.
I've now realized that there are things that are potentially even more difficult than just figuring out how to create enough electricity for a little village with a box that ought to go many, many years and use only local fuels and not be harsh on the environment. There are things that are more difficult than the technology of either of those, because in both cases, even if you could do it, the unanswered question is, great, how are those people that have no water and have no power and therefore have no money going to pay you and reward you for this? It fired itself up. You hear it running. If every house in a village had a light that bright compared to darkness.
Darkness.
And so I'm working at developing solutions and possibly needing a different, quote, business model to get those solutions out. Now, we're going to go down to the river and we're going to go collect a couple of buckets of water.
Okay.
In the case of the water system, whether we succeed or fail will not be based on technology. I'm happy to tell you that us technology guys are not the anchor that's slowing this down. It's people's ability to change, to accept new technology, to look for new answers.
You know, I couldn't sleep last night thinking about the fact that you have the technology to solve so many problems. But you have to explain to me, who did you call to ask for help and who has been helpful?
We did set up a nonprofit organization that has some incredibly influential and prestigious people from the world of politics and business and media. With all of that input from all of those people, I'm hoping that a plan emerges that impacts millions, in fact, hundreds of millions, in fact, potentially 1 billion people. This machine goes into the village. You put one hose in the stuff that you don't want to drink, and out comes the stuff you do want to drink. Every village that has 100 people or less, a few people can bring this into the village, place it down. An entrepreneur or a microfinance person can maintain it and sell the water at a very reasonable price in a pure state. We don't need sophisticated hospitals. We don't need all the exotic medicines and technologies. The first thing we need to do to empty 50% of the beds full of sick people from chronic disease right now is just give them clean water.
What's inside? Well, I know it's complicated.
We figured out a way to combine a bunch of technologies in heat exchangers and compressors so that the actual input power is about 500 watts. It's 1/3 of a handheld hairdryer. The goal was build enough technology into a device and make it simple and rugged, and then put it in this kind of all-weather case so we can put them all over the world. You'll notice it tastes dry. It's literally distilled water.
Yeah.
We're hoping that if you get enough stakeholders all standing around the same box, all asking the same question, why can't these things be placed quickly? We need people that have the
courage, the vision, the wisdom to just try it. The alternative to trying is that another 5 million people are going to die this year without water, most of them kids. I keep coming back to saying the technology is the easy part. Understanding what drives people, individuals, societies, what makes cultures clash. All of those questions are way, way harder to answer than how to solve any particular technical problem to enable a social solution.
For me, for an artist, I look at emotions, and some of them are inexplicable. They're very mysterious, but you want to still analyze them. And that's why I think Blue Velvet, to me, is a great film, because it goes into very inexplicable, twisted behavior that are deeply frightening. And David Lynch intended to be deeply frightening for the audience. Growing up in Italy, it was a time that we had a lot of kidnappings. In the late 70s, we had a very strong wave of terrorism. And I had lots of friends whose father or siblings were kidnapped. So in the context of all that, when I read Blue Velvet, to me, it was a portrait of abused and victimized women. Her character would be victimized by sex because she was ritually raped, but still she used to be seductive to appease people.
Hello, baby.
Shut up!
She was being like a doll. You know, she wears a little wig and she has lips, red lips and blue eyeshadow, like a little doll. She's going to be perfect, and yet she's completely crazy and disturbed. There is the last difficult scene in Blue Velvet where Dorothy Valance appears completely naked. She has come from something very traumatic. And I remember this photo of Nick Hutt in Vietnam, of this little girl walking in the streets. And the gesture is so completely helpless. And so I took that gesture, and I knew it was going to be full-fronted nudity that was going to be so shocking in films, and I didn't want to do that. I would have loved to have come up with a different solution, but I couldn't come out with a more helpless gesture. Later on, I realized that the photo was of a woman, of a little girl who was completely burned with napalm bomb, and she's walking. And what is you see hanging from her is not the clothing, is her skin.
When people go to war, the most bizarre things happen. You wonder why we haven't yet figured out you can make it a win-win instead of a lose-lose.
I identified with Dean and my dad this frustration that they both feel of knowing they know they're right, but nobody's following them yet.
The reason I'm out collecting people, visionaries, people with courage or people with vision or people with resources to try this is because the alternative to me is I'm just wasting my time building science fair projects.
I don't know that I wake up in the morning saying, well, what is the problem out there? See if I can do it. I feel generally overwhelmed. I just say, if I can just raise my children to go to school, and if I can help in my neighborhood, if I can be kind. So after meeting Dean, I felt very humbled. And I was really counting on my dog, Jojo, to redeem me. No, Jojo, forward. Good dog. Good. You know, I always dreamt to be kind of like Jane Goodall or something like that when I was a little kid. But I was bad at school, I was bad in science, and so I remained in the family business, but the curiosity about animals remained. I started raising puppies for the blind, but the real interest for me is to see many, many, many dogs, so I can analyze the different personalities of dogs and understand more about how they think. If dogs is a machine that is pure instinct, why do they have personalities? Is there something? Does he have some of the emotion that I like ours? And to me, that has always been, since I was a little girl, a fascination. What differentiates man from animal? Because man wants very much to be separated from animals and wants to be superior. I could never really express this in my work. So I thought when I made a little bit of money that I can use part of that money in the non-profit world, and this is what Wildlife Conservation Network does, we decided to find some pioneers and help them with our money. We can supply them with computer, radio collar, a lot of technological assistance. Ian Douglas Hamilton has been studying elephants all over Africa. And my daughter is there helping him, volunteering for him. What Ian is trying to do right now, and we're trying to help him finance that, is to create corridors among the national park. And elephants are so intelligent, they can learn these corridors so they don't have to leave their national park to get to the next national park when they know it's tranquil. Sometimes I hear people say, I've gotten so much, I want to give back. But really the engine is curiosity for me. It's the way I want to fulfill another curiosity that I have about life.
Isabella seems very much to be somebody who thinks about the consequences of what she does and how she relates to the world. We talked about our first program for kids.
First, it was an idea 13, 14 years ago.
Is that first only 13 years?
And she really recognizes that there is this cultural issue.
She brought up the fact that kids are subject to a media barrage of the great American lie about what's possible and what's important.
My father said, entertainment is the opium of people. He really saw a deliberate way to distract people from taking responsibilities.
The lay person that you talk to seems to think that you have to make a choice, that either the content will be high quality and valuable and educational, but it's going to be boring and only made for a few, or it'll be fun and exciting, but then it's the kind of nonsense.
Well, can't you be both?
That's to me, I'm thinking, I don't know why people assume it has to be one or the other. That's why when we started first, I said, we just have to reach a high bar. We're competing with the Super Bowl. This year we're going back to the Georgia Dome, and we'll have over 8,000 school teams. We had a lot of teams from Brazil. We had teams coming from Ecuador, Africa.
And how did you start? I mean, what was the idea?
I just thought that the only thing kids celebrate in the modern culture are people from the world of entertainment and the world of sports, which really have become the same field. So I thought, let's put science and technology in that context. Let's show kids that, you know what? Science and technology and engineering and problem solving is just as much fun and just as accessible and just as rewarding as any of these other sports or entertainment activities you do. We'll do this in the Georgia Dome.
I admired the fact that since he was little, it seems to me that Dean had the ability, maybe the culture, maybe the talent, probably a superior brain, but also a sort of a clarity. Nothing intimidates him. Ah, yes, looks like a rehab.
Yeah, this is like a rehab center.
It's like a rehab center, yeah.
So
I'll sit.
So you'll sit down, and now you're in a mode which would be like an ordinary wheelchair. You can go backward or forward. And
yeah, right.
So you could now drive around in this mode. And
can I go up this way?
Drive up the little curb first just to get to what it feels like. And you don't even have to see it. It'll compensate. This is about 3 times as steep as a legal ramp would ever be, and most people in a wheelchair can't even go up a normal one. They fall on their head.
Yeah, that's what they do. They fall. My brother fell several times.
Which is why your brother will love that wheelchair.
Yeah. Jill Rossellini, my brother, from my Indian stepmother. It was my father's 3rd marriage. I received the phone call almost 2 years ago that Gilles has collapsed after complaining of not being able to move his legs. And by the time the paramedics arrived, he was in a coma. He stayed in a coma for about 6 weeks. And he came out of the coma, and part of him was literally dead. That was for a staph infection. The staph infection went into his spine. Gilles now is a little bit more than a paraplegic. The only thing that functions completely is his left arm and his brain. I would imagine that the rehabilitation center will try to get a couple of chairs. I wrote to him some of the details, and he's very excited.
This is like if you were going camping. I'm always afraid when people ask me, why do I do these things, that an answer is going to come across as if I think I'm better than somebody, or more committed, or more passionate, or more philanthropic.
So this is new in the market?
Yes, they're just starting to ship them now. I believe that if you solve really important problems in a way that's better than anybody else could have solved them, you'll make money. Now we'll come back over the next stair, and then you look at the world, and you see how much poverty there is and how much misery. And I have now gotten to a point where some of the problems I see that need to be solved for a broad group of people that probably don't have the money to pay for that solution, even if it's the best solution. There were 2 villages that until we got there had never been electricity.
We look at Africa, we look at other countries where there's enormous poverty. And I do, and I think we all do, feel this moral obligation. What can we do to make it better?
Life is so short. Why waste a single day of it doing something that doesn't matter, that doesn't try to do something big?
Why can't those same villages start with sophisticated technology and point-of-use water for their health?
When Dean talks about, at the end, it becomes a moral choice, I understand. I also say I want to be involved. When my brother became paralyzed and he's in a wheelchair, the first thing that you learn when you talk to them, lean, come to their eye level.
The disabled community needs to have mobility and dignity and access in a world where everybody stands up.
It's incredible. Moving around is just so simple.
To keep me going in the way I like to go takes a lot of resources. I take a lot out of the world. I mean, a lot. I fly my planes. I have my helicopters. Having said that, my whole life I've always assumed when you look back, you want to make sure that you put back more than you took out. I'm standing here and you want to shake hands and say hello. Reach out, lean. Is that unbelievable? And since I'm now taking out a lot, I need to put back a lot. And if you and I had a pushing contest?
Yes, he reacts like a body, just to move. I love that he moves without me when I think I don't move.
Lean! Isn't that great?
This is great. This is so great.